Closed captioning of this program is underwritten by AARP of the Virgin Islands.
The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
Good day, and welcome to the League of Women Voters Meet the Candidates Forum, a program produced in collaboration with WTJX TV for well over 35 years. It is our hope that through these programs, you, the voting public, will have an opportunity to learn about the candidates for elective office. We invite you to look at all our programs for the 2024 election year right here on WTJX TV, with candidates seeking office as a senator in the 36th legislature or as a delegate for the Constitutional Convention. For the first time, we are also interviewing candidates for the boards of education and election. Although all the candidates for these positions were invited, not all responded or accepted the invitation. We're delighted to have here today 3 candidates seeking to be our delegate in the House of Representatives of the 119th Congress. I am Dr. Gwen Marie Molinar, the current president of the League of Women Voters of the Virgin Islands, and with me today as co-moderator is Dr. Laverne Ragstor, a former president of the League. Thank you, Laverne, for being here. Our timer today is board member Ms. Ayantha de Alaman. Thank you, Ayantha, for being here for this important function.
Thank you. I am pleased to be here for this forum, Dr. Molinar. The candidates have been informed in advance of the guidelines for the program. No candidate had access to the questions in advance. The first responder to each question will be rotated among the participants. Timing for the response to each question will be announced in advance. Any comment directed specifically at a participant by another participant will be followed by a rebuttal of 60 seconds. All are expected to be respectful to everyone else.
To begin, I ask each candidate to simply identify who they are and to state their political affiliation and ballot number. We will learn more about each as our discussion ensues. Let's begin with you, Ms. Smith. Please state your name, ballot number, and political affiliation.
Good day. I am Ida Smith, independent candidate, number 3 on the ballot for the U.S. House of Representatives.
Thank you, Mr. Picard.
Good day. St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John, and yes, of course, Water Island. My name is Ronald Picard. I'm a Republican, and I'm number 1 on your ballot, and I'm running for the position of delegate to Congress.
Miss.
Good day. I'm Stacy Plaskett. I'm the Democratic candidate for the office of delegate to Congress for the U.S. House of Representatives, and I'm number 2 on the ballot.
Thank you all. And now let's begin with our discussion. I will ask, as our first responder, to respond to this. What in your background, Ms. Smith, do you believe prepares you for this position, and state what you have accomplished in the past 3 to 4 years that demonstrate that you can be successful as our congressional representatives. So your background and your accomplishments, and you have 2 minutes to discuss that.
Thank you for the question, Dr. Molinar. In my background, I have had 20 plus years of research, specifically with the Virgin Islands, traveling to study at the archives in Denmark, the National Archives and Records Administration in College Park, Maryland, Washington, D.C., the Library of Congress. I have put together a petition for a writ of mandamus in regards to judicial enforcement of Treaty Series number 629, 39 Stat 1706, which is the beginning, the contract which Denmark and the United States had in the year 1916, and it's also applicable to us presently. It is our first Virgin Islands Code of 1956. So I have accomplished that, and I've also done research to make sure that the National Park Service does not encroach on our boundaries. We have something called an official original government survey, which was removed from the record in the Virgin Islands, and under the law, the Land Act of February 11th, 1805, it is supposed to be on record at all times at the cadastral's office and the lieutenant governor's office. I have ensured that updated land patents have happened for my family and assist others that are in need of that whenever the National Park Service says that it has tentative boundary lines versus being managers of the Virgin Islands. They're claiming to own our properties here in these islands. And the treaty, as well as the federal laws, protect us against that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Mr. Picard, the very same question. Would you like me to repeat it, or?
Sure.
Okay. And what is it in your background that you believe prepares you for this position? And state what you have accomplished in the past 3 to 4 years that demonstrate that you can be successful as our congressional representative. So your background and your accomplishments, 2 minutes.
Okay. So, as you guys know, my name is Ronald Picard. I'm born and raised here in the United States Virgin Islands, particularly from St. Croix. My background, as it pertains to my background, I'm a former law enforcement officer, and I've had the experience as a law enforcement officer to deal with numerous amount of cases, regardless, several topics pertaining to the problem and the struggle we're facing here in the Virgin Islands. I'm an activist. I've been an activist for so many years. I was there when the teachers went on strike, the Union Steelworkers of America, the police department, the nurses. That's very imperative, very important. So I've been there with them. I've been there with the struggle. I've been there as it pertains to everything that has been going downhill as it pertains to the territory. And I understand the struggle, I understand the fight, I'm part of the fight itself, and I'm here to make sure I use all my experience, all my skills, all my knowledge to take it with me in Congress, to actually talk to members of Congress and actually explain to them exactly what's really taking place down here in the Virgin Islands. They have to know the struggle that we're going through. They have to know that we're fed up about being 123 years that we're still under insulin restrictions, and not one restriction has ever been lifted. You know, so many different things that Congress needs to know about what's taking place here in the Virgin Islands. But you need the right representative to go out there and actually explain to them what's taking place. And most importantly, you've got to be bipartisan. I've been bipartisan all the days of my life. I'm friends with the Democratic Party, I'm friends with the Republican Party, I'm friends with the ICMs as well as an independent. And you're going to need that friendship and that relationship to establish good judgment about yourself. So when I do go before Congress and I introduce myself as a bipartisan member of Congress representing the Virgin Islands, it'll be much more smoother, much more understandable, and much more easy to get things done. My name is Ronald Picard, and I'm warning you about it.
Thank you. And so, Ms. Plaskett, you are our incumbent. So the voters know you. So could you just briefly refer to your background and then tell us what you have accomplished over the last tenure as our congressional representative?
Thank you for the question. I think it's first important for people to know that I have been a public servant my entire life. After coming out of college, I worked as a staffer on the Hill for both Republican members of Congress as well as for Democrats. After law school, I was a prosecutor working on street crimes, narcotics, also working to support victims of crimes. And coming home to the Virgin Islands, I volunteered tirelessly in many organizations. Once being elected to be the representative for the Virgin Islands in Congress, which has been the most incredible honor to me, I have worked to also not just ensure that laws were passed that support the Virgin Islands, having over 100 provisions that I initiated that are now law, but also ensuring that we have also movement towards self-determination. In this past year, I led a bipartisan letter to the Department of Justice about the insular cases. And from that letter, the Department of Justice has recently issued a notice to all of their offices that they will no longer rely on the insular cases, which we know has been oppressive to the people of the Virgin Islands. I have worked in both Republican and Democratic administrations to ensure that the Virgin Islands has the resources that are now available to us in billions of dollars to rebuild our territory, to redefine who we are, to be a place where our children can come back home, and there are plenty of opportunities for all. It has been my greatest honor to represent the people of the Virgin Islands. There's so much more I want to talk about later in the show.
Great, thank you. Everybody's keeping in the time frame. That's great. Now, the second question for all of you will require a 90-second response. That's a minute and a half. And so I begin with Mr. Picard. You'll be the first responder for this question. And it is this. It's about the relationship of the delegate with the sitting governor. What is it an important relationship between the sitting governor and the representative? What challenges or opportunities, Mr. Picard, do you see for yourself as a delegate who might be of the same or different political party from that of a governor? And how would you manage the associated challenges or opportunities in that setting?
So, first of all, being a member of a particular party should have never been an issue as it pertains to the people in the Virgin Islands. And that has been a problem in all the days of our lives, right? My thing is to work with the governor, the present governor, to make sure that we get bills passed. What is disturbing to me as a Virgin Islander is that I've noticed in Congress, it's been over almost 10 years and only one bill has ever been passed in 10 years. That's very disturbing. It makes me wonder exactly what a relationship our incumbent has with the governor. I feel that the governor, the legislature, the Senate, we should all realize one thing for sure, that we must come together to find a common cause, that common problem that we have. And I have high confidence that myself and the governor, that we work together to attack some of the insular cases as it pertains to what's taking place in Congress. I feel that we can work together as it pertains to me introducing bills that's beneficial for the people of the Virgin Islands. A lot of my bills I plan to introduce are bills that has to do with situation that's affecting us right now, the infrastructure. We have an energy crisis. We never had affordable energy. We never had reliable energy. The situation with the schools, the children, the students, they need new schools to be built, not renovated. These are things that a governor, I'm sure he will also agree with me will as well. And it's good to see that he and I can actually see eye to eye to the problems affecting us here in the Virgin Islands.
Thank you. Yes, and we're going to put the question to you, and we will add on 60 seconds that you can include in your, so as the second responder, you can respond, and you can also include an additional 60 seconds as the rebuttal.
Thank you for that opportunity. First, I have passed way more pieces of legislation than one bill in the 10 years that I've been in Congress. I have, and you can go to my website and see that there are over 100 provisions that have been made into law. From those that have been done as distinct individual pieces of legislation, whether it's removing the federal cap on our federal highways so that we can have additional money in our federal highways from $17 to $40 million annually, to the designation of St. Croix as a National Heritage Area, the Ram's Head plaque, working in a bipartisan manner with my colleagues from Pennsylvania to ensure that that legislation was passed, and additionally, for the $25 million that has now gone to the second phase of the waterfront revitalization in Charlotte Amalie. There are over 100 provisions that I've done. And that is simply understanding how Congress works. In many instances, members of Congress have bills, and what happens is that there are must-pass legislation, which are omnibus bills, the National Defense Authorization, and members of Congress will use that as an opportunity, knowing that those bills must pass, to present their bills as amendments in the Rules Committee. They are debated and voted on the floor, and then they are added to other pieces of legislation which we know must pass in the House and in the Senate and are made into law. And to be able to do that, you have to work in a bipartisan manner. I have over 40 pieces of legislation currently, which I am the primary sponsor and have a Republican co-sponsor, or are Republican bills for which I have co-sponsored legislation with them. And I've also worked tirelessly with respect to bringing resources to the government of the Virgin Islands. In 2018, under the Bipartisan Budget Act, it was my work that ensured that the Virgin Islands government would be able to rebuild not as things were at the time of the storm, but as things should be. That has increased our money that is available for rebuilding from not just $1 billion to over $15 billion. What is also, in some instances, frustrating is people not understanding the difference in the roles. The member of Congress is the individual who gets the resources to the Virgin Islands. It is the governor of the Virgin Islands who actually manages and spends the money.
Thank you very much for that response.
A factual rebuttal, please.
Excuse me, since you were the one who raised it, then you have now 50 seconds for that.
Yes, ma'am. So I did go to
50
her
seconds.
page. She introduced 114 bills, and only one bill was passed in 2016 and was passed by the Republican Party. What the incumbent is trying to tell the people of Virgin Islands that she's passed bill in the House, but in Congress, you must pass the House as well as the Senate. And these bills must be signed by the President of the United States of America. There's only one bill, to my knowledge. I visit her page, so if I'm wrong, then she's providing wrong information. She only introduced 114 bills, ladies and gentlemen, and only one bill in 10 years has ever been passed. Now that's facts.
50 seconds.
Thank you. That is not a fact. And if you would go to my website, you'll see that there is, in fact, lots of legislation which has been passed. I know I may be dating myself, but I wanted everybody to think about Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law. Yes, a bill does have to go through the House and also has to go to the Senate, but this is where experience comes into play. This is where understanding how Congress works. And many members of Congress use their legislation knowing that bills take much time to pass by attaching them to legislation which we know has to get through both the House and the Senate and signed by the President. If that were the case, I would not have been able to have St. Croix National Heritage Area made. I would not have been able to have provisions to remove the cap on our federal highways. I would not have been able to allow our Medicaid to move from 55% to 83%. And yes, that was done in both Republican and Democratic administrations.
Thank you.
Mr.
Excuse me,
President?
Mr. Picard, we have already moved on. We're going to move on. And Ms. Smith, you have your choice, your response now, and again, 90 seconds.
Thank you. The question is, how would I build a relationship with this present governor, and what challenges or opportunities would be there? As a freshman to this whole political scene, I put the people over the politics. And I would definitely, as the incumbent said, get the funds to the Virgin Islands and utilize them where they belong, wisely. For example, the education monies that came in and some of it went back, I would have made sure with the governor and the sitting senators that those monies were applied where they should be, where we should not have schools with mold in them. We should have air conditioners versus falling fans. And after speaking with the citizens, the people of the Virgin Islands in all three islands, I found out that they need infrastructure, they need buses, they need the ferry to go from St. Croix to St. Thomas versus the expense of flying. I would also make sure that the governor and I have a relationship to where we can communicate effectively, whereby the monies that come into the territories are fully used and never to return to Washington, D.C. We need the money. If it came in, we're going to use it wisely. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's look at, take that same scenario to Congress. What would happen, and our first responder here is going to be Ms. Plaskett. What challenges or opportunities have you experienced as a congressperson of a particular political party that is different from that of the congressional majority, and how have you responded to those challenges? And you will have 90 seconds.
Thank you. This has been, the 118th Congress has been a very frustrating Congress for both Democrats and Republicans. I talked to my Republican colleagues who also are concerned at the lack of legislation that has been passed in this Congress. Most Congresses have approximately 400 laws that are passed in a year. This Congress has had less than 100. We are still under a continuing resolution, which means that we don't have a budget for next year, which would normally have been done in the spring prior to the following year, where the budget would exhaust itself in September. And so, working across the aisle with other members of Congress, as well as with my own, we have tried to work on those pieces of legislation that we know will pass. For example, with my good friend Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, the Republican member from Puerto Rico, in President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, we were able to get legislation passed which would increase the ability for the private sector developers to bring offshore wind to the Virgin Islands. And we've also spent a lot of time working with the administration to ensure that the Virgin Islands has the resources to be able to utilize the funding that we have right now. Spending time on that, such as the recent announcement by the governor through the Office of Management and Budget that we were going to be removing the cost share from the Virgin Islands having to pay 10% to 2% for those matters that are those infrastructure that's going to be rebuilt.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, what challenges or opportunities do you see for yourself as you maneuver for the benefit of the territory when you have no strong political party support in the Congress?
Well, I would hope that the challenge that I meet would be that the people of the Virgin Islands would come first, and the Congress would recognize that this is not about political affiliations, it is about the citizens, the people of the United States, and since we are of the United States, that they would treat us accordingly. So I'd take the opportunity to hold the Congress to the rule of the law, that we are unincorporated, yet we are under a treaty between Denmark and the United States that is the supreme law of the land. I would definitely take the opportunity to encourage them that we get the same treatment as any American citizen under the rule of law.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And Mr. Picard, now, although there is a congressional majority of the Republicans now, there's no guarantee that that's going to be the same for the coming Congress. So the question to you is a general one. How would you maneuver if you are a delegate in a Congress that is not necessarily the same as your political party?
Well, first of all, our position in delegate at Congress is a non-voting position. So it's already a handicap. So we have to overcome that handicap by mostly being respectful and being humble to our colleagues. I plan to go there as what I am, a bipartisan. I work with the Democrats as well as the Republicans to explain to them the necessity and the needs as it pertains to the people in the Virgin Islands. And by introducing, have an opportunity to go before subcommittees and committees and being able to talk to my colleagues to explain the seriousness that's taken place in the Virgin Islands. We have a major problem as pertains to the economy. The prices for food is out of control. Our infrastructure, our energy crisis. It's so much things, the school for the children, and most importantly for the schools. My thing is, so when I do talk to my colleagues to explain to how imperative it's been that all these years, all these millions and millions of dollars we've received in the Virgin Islands, to this day, not one school has ever been rebuilt, not renovated, rebuilt here in the Virgin Islands. To explain to them the problem with the students, how much time they're losing as it pertains to education, because every time we have our energy problem, there's no power and the kids lose time. Not to mention the maintenance issue, the molding in the buildings of the school. So I feel by talking to my colleagues, both the Democrats as well as the Republicans, we can come together and find a solution to help the people of the Virgin Islands. But you must be bipartisan. You have to go to Congress as a humble individual. You have to put God first. And you have to make sure that you can get along with your colleagues instead of attacking your colleagues every time there's a session.
Thank you. Very quick rebuttal.
Yes.
60 seconds.
Thank you. I just wanted to have a point of clarification to the members of our community that our position in Congress is not a non-voting position. It is, in fact, a limited voting position. And that's something that many people have fought for and that we need to be aware of. Members of Congress are assigned committees based upon your party assigns committees. Even independents make the decision about whether they are going to caucus with a Democrat or Republican caucus, because those are the two parties that assign committees to members of Congress. After that assignment, you have full voting rights in that committee. You also have voting rights on the floor in committee of the whole on amendments. And you cannot speak before subcommittees or speak before other committees. You are not a witness. You are in fact a colleague and can be waived onto a committee, or you speak in the committee that you are in. And that is why it is important to have colleagues on both sides, to talk with members on the floor about the issues that are important to us, to bring them down to the Virgin Islands as I have, so they can see firsthand our issues.
Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Plaskett. So now let's begin to talk about some of the other issues. And our first responder here is going to be Ms. Smith, and you will have 2 minutes. You will each have 2 minutes to this.
Okay.
One major issue that is of concern is that of the rum cover over. For the benefit of the viewing audience, could you explain, Ms. Smith, what your understanding of the rum cover over is? And the second part of the question is, would you have any interest in pushing for a discussion on including petroleum products in addition to the rum products as part of the cover over? Why or why not? 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you for the question. My understanding of the rum cover over monies is that it is a resource for the people of the Virgin Islands, and the monies that we get from each bottle should be increased from the $10.25 to the $13.50, $10.50 to the $13.50. It would help the GERS. It would help the entire society, in fact. And I am all for us including petroleum and other resources, as there is a great amount of resources here in the Virgin Islands to where we can be international. We don't have to just be with the United States. That would increase everything for the people as far as wealth and finances, and we would not have to be sitting and waiting years for income tax refunds as we have been doing. And people are frustrated about that. So I'm very much interested in getting involved and finding out how to get at these resources so that we can live a better life from generation to generation.
Thank you. Mr. Picard, for 2 minutes, what is your understanding of the rum cover over and including the petroleum?
So the rum cover over is a situation we've been struggling with for years. We're supposed to get a major part of the percentage for the rum cover over for every sale of every bottle. But it's been at $10.50 for so many years, and it's fluctuated, trying to go back up to $13.25. Most recently, the incumbent introduced a bill last year, 9 years later, 9 years after she'd been into office, to have the $13.25 go as permanent. I personally don't believe we should have it as permanent because there's an opportunity for us to get more percentage in the near future. But my thing is to introduce bills asking for more percentage for the rum cover over, which we absolutely deserve, but that's not the case. But in order to do that, we must establish a relationship with members of Congress, both the Democrats as well as Republicans, and explain to them the necessity of us asking for a higher percentage of the rum cover over than what we're receiving now. It can benefit the people of the Virgin Islands in a tremendous way. But in order to do that, we must fight. And we must make sure we have a positive relationship with our members and colleagues in Congress. My only thing is, I actually wish that incumbent had introduced this bill 9 years ago. When President Obama was president, he's a Democrat, she's a Democrat as well. That had been a perfect opportunity for her to introduce that bill as far as it being permanently to $13.25, but she didn't do it. She did it last year. I'm sure she had a reason as to why she waited so long to get it done. But hopefully it can be passed. And if so, if it's possible, and it is possible, for that percentage for $13.25 to go higher than what it is, because we're actually owed much more than we're receiving. Ron Picard.
Thank you for your response. Congresswoman, let me repeat the question for the benefit of the viewing audience. Explain your understanding of the rum cover over, and is there any interest in pushing for including petroleum products? 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you for the question. I know that many people are concerned about us receiving our fair share, particularly when it comes to rum, and the excise tax that comes back to us for each one of the proof gallons that go to the United States. This is an issue for both the Virgin Islands and for Puerto Rico. And I have worked hand in hand with my Republican colleague from Puerto Rico to ensure that we have the best movement on that request. Last year, I did request that the rum cover over be made permanent in President Biden's Build Back Better. At that time, I became a member of the House Ways and Means Committee, which is the oldest and most exclusive committee in Congress, and is actually the committee that does tax writing. Because I was on that committee, I had the opportunity to put legislation in which was way outside of the ballpark of what had been done previously. That permanency actually did pass the House in President Biden's Build Back Better legislation. And it was unfortunate that the entire bill did not pass in the Senate because we did not have one Democrat who would not support it, and there were no Republicans that would support the Build Back Better legislation. That was also legislation what many other states had tax extenders and requests that they had in there, and it all died. We are now in a Congress which has not passed a tax bill, and we are waiting to 2025 when, if elected again, I will be back on the Ways and Means Committee and will in fact request that. As for the gasoline excise that was also part of your question, I know that Judge Hodge did an incredible job of bringing this to the Supreme Court. At that time, the court said that this was not a matter that the court could decide and that Congress was the sole arbiter of it. I have raised this issue with other members of Congress, and they are unwilling to support that legislation.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, we have 2 rebuttals. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Okay.
60 seconds.
Thank you. In regards to the House and Ways Committee, I noticed recently in some publication that the Heritage Foundation is requesting that Congress keep all of the excise taxes from the rum cover over monies for Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and that would give Congress $7 billion with a B of our resources. And we need to be aware that if we do not make Congress know that we will not allow that because of our international status under the treaty, then we will lose those monies as well. Because like I said, the Heritage Foundation did put forth a proposal to Congress in regards to being able to keep $7 billion of these rum cover over monies. And in regards to Puerto Rico, we love Puerto Rico. They're our sister island. However, they are under a different type of treaty.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Picard?
In rebuttal to the incumbent, she said that it couldn't pass the Senate, which was the Republicans. What she's not telling the people of the Virgin Islands is that her behavior in Congress, she's constantly attacked the Republican Party. She's used all kind of names. She accused everyone of being a racist. And she wonders why she can't get a bill passed. As long as she's there, she will never get a bill passed. And we're talking about the House as it pertains to the Senate until she can conduct a professional relationship with members of Congress, both the Republican as well as the Democrats. And that's just reality. It's a shame because I feel like she could have gotten bills passed a long time ago. And she introduced that rum cover over bill in the time when President Obama was in office. We have Obama was in office in 2 administrations. President Biden's in office, who's a Democrat. Obama's a Democrat, and she still couldn't get it passed. But had she established a professional relationship, ladies and gentlemen, and stopped attacking a particular party in Congress, she could have gone much more further. And if she cannot go further, that means we can't go further because she's representing us.
Yes, you may respond. 60
you.
seconds.
I'm grateful that Ms. Smith brought up the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative, Republican-run organization, which is trying to take away a lot of rights of individuals. One of the candidates in this race is a member of the Republican Party who is trying to take away a lot of our rights. As for the bill not passing in the Senate, the bill did not pass because no bill that was part of Build Back Better passed. That was for many of us, many pieces of legislation did not pass in the Republican-run Senate, and we are going to do it again. We have in the past, I have had extenders to the rum cover overpass, and this is not a situation that we have not been in before when we moved back down to the 1025. And in those instances, when a tax bill came up, which will in 2025, it was added to that tax bill and was afforded to the people of the Virgin Islands.
Our next question you will be allowed 2 minutes, and we're going to start with you, Mr. Picard. The current Congress has developed bills to curtail what has been characterized, and I quote, as excessive federal intervention in the everyday lives of citizens and activities of businesses, end quote. What is your opinion on federal oversight in such areas as the workplace and the external environment in particular? Would you support continued federal oversight, or would you join in pushing for its rollback? You have 2 minutes.
That's a very realistic question, or rather statement. In some cases, you do need a federal government to actually intercede. Prime case example, WAPA. The federal government should have had their hands in WAPA years ago. And the audits is highly imperative that forensic audits should have been conducted in WAPA, and all of the money that's been brought down from Congress to the Virgin Islands that disappears like that. There's no accountability, there's no transparency, and because of that, the money continues to disappear. I feel that the federal government should get their hands involved in situations in certain, I won't say all, but in certain topics, in certain situations like WAPA, and that needs to be addressed. So if we do get the assistance of federal government to conduct an oversight as it pertains to the misappropriation, mishandling of federally funded money, it would do good. Prime case example, you had 5 congressmen that wrote letters to HUD and other departments explaining the misappropriation that's taken place in WAPA.
Thank you. Ms. Plaskett, could you please answer the same question regarding your opinion on federal oversight in such areas as the workplace and external environment? And would you support continued federal oversight, or would you join in pushing for its rollback?
Thank you. I agree that there are places where there should be federal oversight. I'm grateful for the work that the EPA has done on my home island of St. Croix as it pertains to the refinery, ensuring that it's a safe environment for those who live within that neighborhood. And then also assisting so that things can be done appropriately and rightly so that we can continue to have the work, but in a safe environment. Additionally, with regard to federal monies that are coming down to the Virgin Islands, I'm grateful that there has been investigations. My office has requested audits, reports to be done. Some of those are published on HUD's website, Housing and Urban Development, as well as FEMA. And it was in fact a federal investigation which showed the misappropriation and misuse of lumber in the housing program on St. Croix that led to an indictment of an individual related to that. So we know that there is some oversight being done. We all need to work together to ensure that all of this money gets on the ground to where it's supposed to. And that takes many branches of government, investigative from the Department of Justice and from the judiciary branch, legislation being put in at the federal level to ensure that money is spent, as well as our own local legislature, which has subpoena power over the governor and the administration and how that money is used.
Thank you. A quick rebuttal for that, ma'am, a factual rebuttal.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Most recently, like I said earlier,
60 seconds.
it won't take that long. We had 5 of her colleagues that addressed the situation as it pertains to misappropriation of federally funded money here in the Virgin Islands. And instead of the incumbent join her colleagues to fight, which we all know there's a lot of misappropriation of federally funded money here, she called it propaganda. Not that she agreed to the fact that we have a problem with misappropriation or mishandling or misuse of money. The help that was coming to assist us, she called it propaganda. Fighting against our very own people. by dismissing the fact that we have a problem or issue as it pertains to misappropriation and public funds. And this is factual documentation, what I'm talking about.
Yes, response, 60 seconds.
The specific letter that the candidate is speaking of was related to VTOL. These were individual members of Congress who were in fact lobbied by VTOL to push and to pressure the government of the Virgin Islands to use CDBG money, which I felt should more rightly go to assist in building housing, to pay for VTOL, a contract which I believe was erroneously done, which had terms in it which were usury with 15% interest rates and had blown up way more than the original contract was. These members of Congress were pushing and trying to get the governor to in fact pay VTOL, which he did. And once again, I was in a role where I could not force the governor to do that, but that pressure, which my opponent believes was appropriate, caused the use of $100 million rather than going to housing, going to pay a company called VTOL.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we need to now move on.
Ms. Smith.
Yes, Ms. Smith, you are the final responder to this question. And just to remind you, this is your opinion on the federal oversight and whether or not you think there should be continued oversight or we should join in its rollback.
Thank you for the question. In regards to federal oversight, I am all for it. And I appreciate the question because it is specifically written in Article 6 of Treaty Series number 629, which is the First Virgin Islands Code, where Congress does have control over the political and the civil activities in the Virgin Islands, except as it pertains to the stipulations in the treaty. I am all for the DEA, the EPA, HUD, FEMA, and any agency that is going to assist the people of the Virgin Islands in a positive way and increase our living standard and not subtract from it. Specifically, we need better housing, we need better infrastructure, and the bill that passed, the food bill that passed, we need those monies to come here and be used by our farmers so that we can become more independent and a stable economy for our food, housing, and transportation. So I am for Congress assisting us in that way, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess the next question we can move on, and we're going to start with you, Ms. Plaskett, and you have 60 seconds for this one. What is your position on enacting workplace requirements for federal assistance programs such as Medicaid, SNAP, and the temporary assistance for needy families? 60 seconds.
Thank you for the question. This has been something, I was a member of the Agriculture Committee for 8 years. On the Agriculture Committee, we also deal with nutrition. And in the Farm Bill, which is passed every 4 years, this became an incredible bone of contention between both the Democrats and the Republicans, where it was difficult for us to find common ground. Many of us believe that those neediest families are doing what's necessary and are trying desperately, particularly our elders and others who are on fixed incomes, and having work requirements for them seem to be incredibly onerous. Additionally, individuals are in fact given a time to find work, but if there is not work in their area, then they should be allowed to continue to receive the most basic thing, which is food. I'm grateful that I've been working with members of the Republican Party to support legislation from members from Pennsylvania as well as New York to increase the amount of food that's coming to the tables of our children through local farms.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we move on to, I guess the next person will be Ms. Smith. Yes. The question has to do with whether or not you believe that there should be federal assistance programs is in the requirement, we should have workplace requirements for federal assistance programs such as Medicaid, SNAP, and temporary assistance for needy families.
Thank you for the question. I absolutely believe that there should be workplace requirements for Medicaid, SNAP, if the person is able to work, then they should be able to work to receive the benefits. Medicaid for the elderly and Medicare, that should be an absolute yes. They deserve it, they earned it, and they're entitled to it, and they need it. So the Medicaid that is coming into the territory should continue to come into the territory, as well as the SNAP benefits. If an able-bodied person is able to get out and work part-time, then they should be able to do that in order to get the benefits. I do believe that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Picard, you have 60 seconds to answer the same question regarding enacting workplace requirements for federal assistance programs.
So there are federal assistance programs. And here's the situation, ladies and gentlemen. It's not that we don't have programs here to assist our people. It's the fact that the money coming down from the federal government, there's no accountability for this money. When majority of this money disappear, there's no accountability. That's our biggest problem. Frank is an example too. The vendors for Medicaid, Medicare, the MAP, there are a lot of patients right now that they cannot travel to the United States and get medical surgeries conducted. And the reason is that because we owe the vendors. So there are a lot of vendors that we owe that have not been paid. That's why one of my main things is when I get into Congress is to get the finance and to pay these vendors so that our services can open back up again for the people of the Virgin Islands. There's so many programs down there, federally funded programs, that's on standby. And it continues to be on standby. And the people are frustrated because they're wondering what happened to the money. Why is the process taking so long?
Thank you, Mr. Picard. We have a rebuttal here from Ms. Plaskett for 60 seconds, please.
Thank you. The reason I'm rebutting is because my opponent did not respond to the question, which is whether or not he believed that there should be workplace requirements, that there should be work requirements for people who are receiving public assistance, whether that be food stamps, whether that be TANF, or Medicaid or Medicare. The Republican Party, for which he is a member, has said that those workplace requirements should in fact be in place. That has been a major difference between the Democrat and the Republican Party on the issue of food stamps and others. Their concern is that too much money is being given in social services to children. They want to cut school lunch programs. They want to cut food stamps going to neediest families. And they say that those individuals should find the resources to take care of it themselves. Yes, in areas where people can find work and they are able-bodied, they should work. But there are many places in our country, including the Virgin Islands, where people are unable to find the kind of work or do not have the skill set or the ability to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we need to,
Can you rebuttal that?
yes, you can answer for 60 seconds.
Obviously, of course, I do believe that if you're able to work, it's highly imperative that you do work to get. And of course, I will never stand here and say if a person has an able body and you're able to actually contribute to society as pertains to working, of course I'll say work. Absolutely. What she's trying to indicate, she's trying to insinuate that the Republican Party, our job is to try to stop people's benefit, and that's not factual. We're here to help the people of Virgin Islands. As it stands right now, going on 60 years, the Virgin Island has been ran by the Democratic Party, and look exactly where we are right now today. I'm just simply saying they need a change in balance. If one thing isn't working, then you have to try something else. Do not get confused with the parties as pertains to Republicans or Democrats. She's bringing down that stateside difference, that war that's taking place between the Republican Party and Democrats. Down here is all about Virgin Islanders, and we have to work together.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have another question, I believe, yes. And this one is 90 seconds, and we're going to start with Ms. Smith. Okay. This is on Social Security. In a recent survey by the AARP in the Virgin Islands, 7 in 10 local residents age 45 plus rely on Social Security as a major part or sole source of income, in retirement. With the Social Security Trust predicted to see a shortfall in 10 years, persons counting on Social Security will see a cut to the money they have earned. What solutions do you see Congress working on to strengthen Social Security for those who rely on it? You have 90 seconds.
Thank you for the question. I see Congress working on the solution to strengthen Social Security for the future by making sure that the people of the Virgin Islands get what is entitled to them, be it through our resources that we have already with the rum cover over, if we need to use some of that money, if we use the petroleum, if we use our agriculture, we should be sustainable. We should not have to rely on Social Security, which may or may not be cut. And I did hear from the ARRP, and I saw the incumbent was on there just as recent. I listened to that, and it is in fact needed in the Virgin Islands. So we would speak with them, we being, as your representative, I would speak with them and let them to know that it is a necessity, we rely on it, and it cannot be cut.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Picard, I believe you are next.
Yes, ma'am. So Social Security is very imperative. As you know right now, the economy in the Virgin Islands is really sustained a major blow. While in Congress, I will talk to my colleagues and explain to them how imperative it is to make sure that the Social Security is not touched. Right now, as it pertains to Virgin Islanders who reside in the United States and they receive SSI benefits, right? So certain benefits. A lot of them cannot even come back to the Virgin Islands because when they do come back to the Virgin Islands, certain benefits are cut automatically as you touch down in the soil. And that shouldn't be the case. As a matter of fact, there's a case taking place right now in Puerto Rico as it pertains to that. So my thing is to further encourage and enlighten the people, my colleagues in Congress, how important it is and how the people of the Virgin Islands rely strongly on receiving the full benefit as it pertains to Social Security. Mr. Ron Picard.
Thank you. Ms. Plaskett, could you tell us how do you see Congress working to strengthen Social Security for those who rely on it? 90 seconds.
Thank you. Unfortunately, this is an area where there's great differences in members of Congress as to how to advance Social Security. I have co-sponsored legislation that's been offered by colleagues, John Larson of Connecticut, to put additional resources and money into the Social Security Trust so that that money is there. I also, in the last Congress, was able to get a change in law for Medicaid individuals so that people who are on Medicaid, the federal government is paying 83% as opposed to the 55% that they were paying previously. That has meant that 20,000 more Virgin Islanders, our most needy members of our community, are in fact receiving health care. And as for SSI, being on the Ways and Means Committee, and let me tell you, the only reason I am the first delegate and only the fourth Black woman in history to be on the Ways and Means Committee is because the entire Democratic caucus unanimously said that I should be one of the members representing the Democrats on that committee. And while I was on that committee, when President Biden's legislation was introduced for Build Back Better, sitting on the committee, I was able to put in SSI for the territories. That bill passed the House and unfortunately died in the Senate. If reelected, I will introduce it again.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to another question that I think will be of great interest to all of our candidates. And we're going to start with you, Mr. Picard. For 60 seconds, the League of Women Voters is concerned about the number of people who say they are not going to be voting in the coming election, as they feel there's little being done to alleviate issues that seem to grow larger every year, such as crime and energy. What can you say to voters about the need to vote, and in particular, for the congressional representative?
Well, that's so unfortunate, and that's a fact. Every election, you see a reduction of voters voting in the ballots. People are frustrated, they're upset. They don't see any growth as it pertains to the public sector, and they don't see any growth as it pertains to the private sector. They look at the statistics. They check and see that we're ranked number 4 in the world as it pertains to homicide. We're ranked number 1 in the nation as it pertains to human sex trafficking. They see that we're up to 45% as it pertains to poverty. And we have a 95% as it pertains to illiteracy rate. So Virgin Islanders are leaving the Virgin Islands in groves. But I encourage you guys, you have to continue to vote. Come back out and vote. It's a shame because as you see right now, over 30-something thousand people, Virgin Islanders, have left the Virgin Islands and relocated back to the United States. That's 30-something thousand people who are not going to be voting for candidates. And it's very unfortunate. But what do we do? The biggest question. How do we tell the people of Virgin Islands who still remains in Virgin Islands to vote? We must come out. We must encourage you to vote. It's your right.
Thank you. Ms. Plaskett, could you please speak to how you see, what would you say to voters who say they don't want to come out to vote?
Sure. I would first say is that all of us here that are speaking to you live here with you, and we understand your frustration. We feel it as well. The high cost and unreliable energy that you're experiencing, we also are experiencing. I am experiencing in my own household. The concern about crime as my sons go out to work, the ones that live here in the Virgin Islands, I worry about them as it pertains to violent crime that are happening. But know that in Congress, I am doing what's necessary in my job to try and bring the resources to the Virgin Islands to combat that, whether it's bringing additional marine boats to our police department for drug and gun interdictions, to ensuring that the Virgin Islands has $6 billion to revamp WAPA. My frustration is knowing that that is the job of the executive branch of the Virgin Islands and feeling the frustration of that money not being seen by people in the territory.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, we need to know, how are you going to talk to people about getting out to vote, especially for folks going forward to Congress?
Thank you for the question. Being the newbie here, I did go out and canvass, and I spoke with people of all walks of lives, from the street guys to the executives. And yes, they are upset about the crime. They are upset about the energy and the fossil fuel that's still being used. I try to encourage them that your vote is your voice, and don't be hopeless, because new people have stepped up to the plate, and those that know it, feel it, and we are feeling it. Therefore, we're here to make a positive change for these Virgin Islands, and that we will definitely do. We won't be about talking, we'll be about doing. So I let them to know, yes, in the past, the parties have done wrong to the people, but this time we're not about the parties. We're about the people, and we will do the work that needs to be done. Just please be encouraged and go out and vote.
Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Molinar?
Yes, great. So for the next question, you will each have 2 minutes. And the question is this: what do you see as the key issues facing the territories that could be addressed by the congressional representative? And then discuss what your plans are for developing at least one of these. And for this question, we begin with Ms. Plaskett.
Thank you. I know that some of the key issues are the ones that we just spoke about. One of those is energy. In my office, I've been able to ensure through the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 that the Virgin Islands had the financial resources and the money to be able to not only do our utilities, our energy, but also our potable water. $6 billion coming to the territory. Additionally, I have worked as a member of the Ways and Means to ensure that the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit actually gets reimbursed to us. That was legislation that was passed that I had offered. That means that $20 million more are coming annually to the Virgin Islands to ensure that that money goes to, and I'm grateful to the governor and the legislature, to ensuring that that money is going to tax returns, as well as to pay back the 8% cut for those government employees. And as long with having been on that committee when there was a $540 million check the Treasury was able to write to us for potential lost revenues during the pandemic, the governor and legislature determined that part of that money would be used in 2022 and 2023 to offset budget shortfalls that we were having. I'm grateful for that, but there's still so much work to be done. I want to ensure that SSI comes to our most vulnerable Virgin Islanders by reintroducing the legislation as a tax bill is being drafted in 2025, ensuring that monies that we have offered in the reports, in the requests with these agencies, working hand in glove to make sure it's happened. I've had frustrations, and those of you who watch the news know that I've had my public disputes with the governor about how the funding is spent. As a member of Congress, that is not my job to actually manage and utilize the money, but having put it in there, I'm watching with a hawk how that money is being spent. I also want to ensure that our schools are actually rebuilt in the 10 years' time that they are supposed to be built.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, what do you see as the key issues affecting the territory that you could address as Congress?
Thank you for the question. Not only do I see the key issues, but the people in the Virgin Islands have stated the issues with much frustration that WAPA is an issue, fossil fuel, having inconsistent electricity, causing their appliances to be damaged. That's a key issue. Not having consistent water to bathe properly, that's an issue. And I see that we can bring in solar energy, we can bring in hydro energy. Since we are an island surrounded by waters, we should utilize the new technology versus the old that has not worked for over 5 decades. I also see that education, without our youth, our offspring having proper education and getting the skills that are required to not only be able to build a better Virgin Islands, but to be able to work internationally. That I would definitely make my top priority. Without our youth having the skills, then we are in despair. And we need to be able to be productive citizens of the planet. So I would definitely work on bills that would make sure that the education system in the Virgin Islands is the top. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Picard. The same for you question. What do you see as the critical issues facing the territory that you could address as a congressman?
One of the critical issues facing the territory is the promise of how much hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that the government has brought down to the Virgin Islands. But if you look outside your door, you see you can't find 1 penny of that money. We still have problems that pertains to infrastructure. We have water that we want to be free from lead contamination. We have a major problem as it pertains to energy crisis. One of the things I want to address is to make sure that when I do receive money from Congress and bring it to my people here in the Virgin Islands, I'll make sure that I do follow that money. I will be watching up that money. If the incumbent was watching the money, like she said, like a hawk, then $4 million wouldn't have been stolen in the first place. We got to make sure we conduct something that never been done before in modern history. It's imperative that we conduct what's called a forensic audit, which is a prosecutional audit, to make sure that the money goes in the department that it's allowed to go to. If I get $5 million for education, $5 million need to go to education. If we get $10 million for healthcare, $10 million should go to healthcare. And in order to get this done, all of this money is being brought down to the Virgin Islands. We have to follow the money to make sure it goes where it's supposed to go. And that's something you guarantee that Picard will do.
Yeah, 60 seconds.
Okay. I agree that, in fact, one of the most frustrating jobs for me is I know how much work it was to ensure that the Virgin Islands had the appropriation of this money, that the money was in fact then obligated to the Virgin Islands for the rebuild. We have on deck to rebuild 10 schools, to rebuild our hospitals. I have an elderly mother. I'm concerned about her and the use of our hospitals here. We are all concerned about our children in the public school systems here and having the facilities that they need. The job, however, of a member of Congress is not, in fact, to be that oversight person over money once it comes. This is a job for all of us. I have written and requested for reports and reviews and audits, and in fact, those have been done, as we've seen in investigations that have happened, indictments that have taken place. Additionally, we have a local legislature which has subpoena power and the oversight over the government.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Picard, we do have to move on. You did have your time. And so.
I think I have the next question.
Yes.
This one is one that I find extremely important. And I'm going to start with Ms. Smith. Okay. How would you describe a successful relationship between the USVI delegate and the Office of Insular Affairs? What would be the possible benefits to the territory based on the way you saw a good relationship going forward? And you have 60 seconds.
Thank you for the question. I so appreciate it because under Title 48, United States Code 1541, the Secretary of the Interior, who is over the Office of Insular Affairs, is the person that's federally responsible for the Virgin Islands. So to have a relationship with that person, right now sitting in office is Deb Haaland, would be an excellent thing to do because, as I stated, she's the one that's responsible. She's over the governor. Therefore, if we had a relationship with her, then we would be in better condition than we are right now. There is something called the Land Act of February 11th, 1805, and the Secretary of Interior is statutorily responsible to ensure that our original government surveys are on record at all times, and that completes our ownership to our properties throughout the entire territory, not just St. John, which, by the way, was the Secretary of Interior that took a deed of gift to form the National Park Service.
For 60 seconds, how would you describe a successful relationship between the USVI delegate and the Office of Insular Affairs? And what would be the possible benefits to such a relationship?
Well, it'll have a positive effect if we can conduct a relationship. Myself can conduct a relationship with Office of Insular Affairs. Like I said before, we're looking at 123 years we've been under insular restriction. And I took advantage when I was at RNC convention to speak to a lot of delegates from all the different U.S. territories, from Puerto Rico to Guam to some more. And believe it or not, we're all facing similar problems and similar issues. We all have an energy crisis situation. We all have a situation as it pertains to misappropriation of public funds. And we all wanted to know, one question came up, is that we all wanted to know, why can't we vote for the President of the United States in today's date? And I said it would be good if we can all come together as insular islands and approach this with yet a bigger voice in unity versus just each island trying to address our insular cases. I think we'll definitely see a positive result in that way.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Plaskett, you've done this many times, so you know how this goes. Could you tell us how you would describe a successful relationship between the delegate's office and the Office of Insular Affairs?
Well, as it presently stands, the Office of Insular Affairs is very important because, as you've heard, they have oversight over the Virgin Islands, provide a lot of technical support. I'm grateful to have Secretary Deb Haaland, who was my colleague when she was a member of Congress. She's also a Native American and understands issues of oppression, issues of lack of self-determination, and is keenly focused on that for all of the areas in which the insular areas operate. I also have been working very much, and if you look, you'll see how many pieces of legislation myself and the members of the territories work on together. We meet monthly and rotate offices and have lunch together. We co-sponsor legislation that's related to all of the territories together, and we use our different positions on different committees to try and support one another. But I do believe that H.R. 1, which was passed in the House under Speaker Pelosi, gave a movement to self-determination for us, which is absolutely imperative, so that we eventually are not under the Insular Areas Act.
Thank you. Dr. Molnar, you have a question
Yes,
before we go to the final?
Yes, we do have time for one more question. And the question is this, for which you would each have 60 seconds to respond, and Ms. Smith, you'll begin first. What is most understood by voters about the role of the delegate, and what could you do to clarify that? 60 seconds.
Thank you for the question. What is most understood by the voter? Misunderstood by the voters is that the delegate gets the monies and has the power to distribute the monies to the different departments. That is one of the things that's misunderstood. However, in my role as the new delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives, or delegate to Congress, I would add that as a requirement that once we get the monies, that I am able to come down once a month or have people on the ground to where the monies get applied correctly, since that is one of the biggest issues that the people are complaining about, that the monies come in, we don't know where it's going, and we're stuck in a place of despair.
Thank you. Mr. Picard.
Question one more time?
Yes. What is the most misunderstood by voters about the role of the delegate?
Well, one of the most misunderstood things that pertains to the role of a delegate, the people of Virgin Islands say, Picard, as I campaign, I talk about what I plan to do. And they wonder, why do I have to follow the money? They say that's above and beyond the call of duty as it pertains to a delegate. But that's not the case. What they need to understand is that we have to follow the money to make sure the money goes where it's allotted to go. We all witness for a fact that millions of dollars have been brought down from Congress here to the Virgin Islands, but then it disappears. So if I'm going to bring money down here for my people here in the Virgin Islands, it's highly imperative that I follow that money and make sure I hold every single person accountable for every penny of that money that comes down to the Virgin Islands. The people want to see schools built. They want to see the infrastructure finally solved. You have beginning and ending date as it pertains to federal projects, but when you come to the ending date continues to go on and on and on. People are tired. They want to see an end.
Ms. Plaskett.
Thank you. I think there are two areas that people misunderstand. The first is, as was previously stated, and it is one of the more frustrating portions of being a member of Congress, and this goes not just with the Virgin Islands, but across the states, is that members of Congress are the ones that get the federal support, and they do not have the ability in any state or any territory to actually utilize that money. That separation of powers exists with the executive branch of local government. The other misunderstanding that people have is that Congress has in fact has appropriated to us the $15 billion, but that money is actually not here in the Virgin Islands. That money is waiting and available to us as the projects are being done and as the projects are completed. My frustration has been that only recently has there been agreement on what the project's costs are actually going to be so that they can begin. And I made sure in the cost share that was given to us that there is an end date, and that's 10 years from now.
Thank you very much.
Believe it or not, we're at a final question. We had more, but this is just the way the time goes. And we're going to start with you, Mr. Picard, as the first person for the final question. Please speak to any issues of particular concern that you will seek to address during your tenure as our congressional representative in the next Congress if elected. And you have 60 seconds, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
90 seconds.
I'm sorry.
90 seconds.
My fault.
And particularly
90 seconds.
a topic that we have not spent any time discussing that
Right.
you would like to enhance. Yeah.
Something,
Okay.
90
yes, that
seconds.
you think you would want to have happen. Yes.
So as it stands right now, we have a major problem as it pertains to the economy, food. I like to address topics that's really affecting us. Energy is affecting us. The lack of food that we have and how expensive food is right now. Agriculture. We need to be pro-life. And these are things that can be addressed. I want to make sure, I would like to see that we're exempt for any kind of food products coming to the Virgin Islands, going to the Virgin Islands. I like to see that we have so much local vendors that have so much local talent that would like to send their products to the mainland or all the different countries. I like to see that they were exempt for any taxes for sending their skills and trade. There are so many different federal programs out there in Congress that we can apply for, that the people of the Virgin Islands can benefit from. I'd like to see these federal programs be administered to the people of the Virgin Islands. I'd like to see the schools rebuilt. I'd like to see everything that's affecting us right now. If you're from the Virgin Islands and you're born and raised here and you're living here, you know for a fact what's the problem and the issue that we face every single day. But you know who doesn't know about it? Members of Congress. I would love to invite them to the Virgin Islands because sometimes it's good for them to physically see what you're talking about in Congress. And they have to know, it's highly imperative to know the condition that we've been forced to live in for God knows how many years. And it needs to come to an end.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'm next.
Yes.
Yes,
See you
you
looking
are.
at me. Thank you. I think topics that we didn't discuss, which are really important to me, that I've been working on for a long time, one is housing. I know that we have a lot of young people and others who cannot afford housing. I talked a little bit about a dispute that I had with the governor about CDBG funding and how it was be used. I'm hopeful that in the next Congress, there'll be more funding and more support to ensure that housing takes place here in the Virgin Islands, that people can take advantage of tax breaks and exemptions so that they have more down payments and the process is speedier for people to be put into housing. Additionally, job skills and jobs training. We're talking about a rebuild of 2 hospitals, of over 10 schools, refurbishing 15 other schools here, along with infrastructure, whether it's our utilities, potable water, etc. We're going to need the support of Congress to be able to train Virgin Islanders so that we don't just have to get people from off island. And the other area, one that I have been incredibly engaged in since I came to Congress, is agriculture. I've been really grateful and supportive that I've been able to bring down members of Congress and experts to go and do farm tours to support our farmers. This year we had 130 farmers finally receive their settlement of a longstanding discrimination suit against Black farmers, where $3 million was given. I've also given money for water and irrigation projects. Those are so many things that are right on the ground that I want to continue working on.
Thank
And
you.
finally, Ms. Smith, yes?
Repeat the question, please.
Of course. We are asking for you to give us any specific issues of concern that you will seek to address during your tenure as our congressional delegate in the next Congress if elected.
Thank you for the question. Mental health. Mental health is very serious here in the Virgin Islands. We see it and we act like we don't see it. Every day there's someone walking up and down the street, and that's a part of our human race, that's a part of our family. I would definitely address the mental health issues that we're experiencing here. Homelessness is also a very serious issue here that we are ignoring. We need the funding to make sure that the homeless situation with this less than 100,000 people population does not exist. It should not exist. We have more than enough land to where we can build what is required to make sure that everyone has a home. And with a home, you will have a better mental health.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so now we come to your closing statements. And you will each have 2 minutes to do your campaign talk to tell the voters why you should be the person selected to be our congressional representative. So we begin, we chose lots the last time, and you chose selected number 1, yes.
Yes. Good day, family, Virgin Islanders. I am Ida Smith, number 3 on the ballot for the U.S. House of Representatives, and I should be your chosen delegate because I've been representing you for over 20 years, just in the background. I'm stepping up to the plate because I have integrity that does not quit. I will be held accountable for the monies that come to the Virgin Islands. I am a mother of 3, a grandmother of 3. I put God first and the law of God first, and then the law of man. I believe in the rule of law, and I will continue to follow the law and do what is required for the people, by the people. As they ask for it, I will ensure that the needs are met. That is why you should vote for me on November 5th, because I get what needs to be done. As a woman, as a mother, as a person that is not into a political affiliation, that is unbought and unbossed, as the late Shirley Chisholm from New York was. I will do what you need done in these Virgin Islands finally. Thank you for your consideration, and I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Picard.
My name is Ronald Picard, and I'm 1 on your ballot. I'm a husband, I'm a father of 2 beautiful kids, a wonderful wife, and they look up to me to do the right thing. I have a 3-point value in my life. That's God, family, and land. And without God, there can be no family or no land. At some point, we have to face reality. The incumbent has been in office for going almost 10 years. And this is the result of all the federal funded money. You cannot deny the facts. Not one school has ever been rebuilt. Not one. money brought down for energy, yet we're still experiencing energy crisis here in the Virgin Islands. We have food crisis here in the Virgin Islands. Water contamination as pertains to lead crisis here in the Virgin Islands. All I want to do is to open back up the services so that we can all take advantage of the services that we're supposed to have. And in order to do that while you're in Congress, ladies and gentlemen, it is imperative. You must be able to get along with both the Republican as well as the Democrats. We have to represent the Virgin Islands in a respectful and a professional manner and establish a relationship with our members in Congress for the benefit of the people of the Virgin Islands. So in fact, when we do introduce the bill, we have a higher percentage of chances of those bills being passed. That's going to affect the people of the Virgin Islands in a positive manner. We want roads. Give us our roads back. Give us a brand new school back. Give us reliable energy back. Reduce the crime down here in the Virgin Islands. A lot of these things are going to take money, ladies and gentlemen. And that money is going to come from Congress. But you've got to follow the money. If you don't, what would happen has been going on for years. It'll disappear. Ron Picard, number 1 on your ballot.
Thank you, Ms. Plaskett. Now you have your 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening and for considering us as your delegate to Congress. I have to tell you a little bit about myself. As I said, I am a mother. I have 5 children. I'm a wife, but more importantly, I'm a daughter. Both of my parents were born on St. Croix and fell in love and had to, for economic reasons, leave the Virgin Islands, their home, a place where our family has been for 3 centuries. And so I was born and raised in New York. And so I want to say to those families who had to leave after the storms because of the closure of Hovensa for school and have had children, I want to say this to their children. Whether you're born in Atlanta, Tampa, in fact, whether you were born in Nevis or St. Vincent, as my father-in-law was, or even in the West Bank and other places, or right here in the Virgin Islands, it's not about where you were born, it's about who you are. It's about what you've done. I've dedicated my life to public service as a prosecutor, as a volunteer, as an attorney working on the Hill, and yes, the greatest honor to be your delegate to Congress. And I hit the ground running, and I've been running ever since, advocating, fighting for the people of the Virgin Islands, ensuring that there are resources available, whether it comes to schools, to fight crime, to have new jobs, housing. That's been my job, and I've been effective in my job. I have invited and brought down more than 130 members of Congress of both parties in the 10 years that I've been here. They've seen what we are. They know the Virgin Islands because they know me. They know the work and the integrity that I bring in each one of my offerings. And that is why I'm asking for your vote and your support to continue the work that we have begun. Allow me to continue to be your delegate to Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all 3 of you. Thank you so very much, candidates. I think our community now has a better understanding of you and where you stand. I want to thank WTJX and the staff for today's program. And co-moderator, Dr. Raxa, thank you for being here, and our timer, Ms. De Alamal. The League of Women Voters hopes this program has helped you, the voter, in learning more about the candidates for our congressional representative in the 119th Congress and has informed your vote. The League reminds you that every vote does count. During elections, we often see an individual who barely loses and wishes if only a few more persons had voted. Let your voice be heard by your vote, because in a democracy, it is the voter who is in the driver's seat. But you know, your responsibility doesn't end on election night. That is not the way it works. You have to keep the persons you elected accountable. If not, they can do or not do what you thought they would do. So attend their hearings, offer comments on their proposed bills, attend their town halls, invite them to speak at your clubs or organizations. Monitor what they say and how they vote at meetings. It is the only way to get the change you seek. Thank you all for watching. I am Gwen Marie Molinar, President of the League of Women Voters, saying vote early or vote on November 5th. And then keep your hands on the wheel, because as a voter, you are in the driver's seat. Thank you for watching.
The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
Closed captioning for this program was underwritten by AARP of the Virgin Islands.